Good afternoon. Again, my name is Terry Glavin. I'm an attorney at the Department of Procurement Services here at the City of Chicago. I want to welcome you on behalf of Mayor Rahm Emanuel and our Commissioner, Chief Procurement Officer Jamie Rhee. We want to welcome you and we want to thank you for taking time out of your busy work schedules to be here today to learn about procurement fundamentals. Before I get into the presentation much further, I want to give you my contact information. The reason is that I'm going to do my best to be as informative as I can today, but I want to be an ongoing resource to you. So if in the future you want to reach out to me, feel free. If I'm not the best resource at the city, you can always reach out to me anyway, and I'll try to identify the best resource for you, connect you with that resource, and hopefully you'll get your assistance as soon as possible. So my email address is my name, so it's terrence.glavin@cityofchicago.org. That's TERRENCE.GLAVIN@cityofchicago.org. And a number where you can reach me at the office, I can be reached at 312-744-0851. So please feel free to reach out to me at your convenience. And if you miss any of the information that I addressed today, including my contact information, keep in mind, all our workshops are streamed live on YouTube. You can always go back, you can always pick up what it is you either missed or have forgotten since the time that you leave. So please follow us on YouTube, check out all our workshops, this one, additional workshops that I teach, and other workshops that are presented by experts in the Department of Procurement Services. So let's begin with the topic today. The topic is procurement fundamentals. So if you get down to the basics of working with the Department of Procurement Services and our fundamentals and seeking to get a business opportunity, you're going to deal with our department, and it's good to know a little bit about us. Department of Procurement Services is the contracting authority for the City of Chicago. We procure goods and services, and we do so in accordance with law, federal law, state law, municipal code, and in accordance with our own policies and procedures. And I'll talk a little bit about those, that framework in a moment. We try to conduct our process, and we believe we do so with integrity to create public trust and transparency as the law prescribes. Now, when you deal with the Department of Procurement Services, just like your business, just like your industry, we speak our own language, right? And over time, what is good for you to do, if you haven't done city business before, is to start learning our language. And we do our best to have good communication with vendors. But as you're reading documents that we put out, as you're asking questions of us and receiving answers, it's good to understand the language. So we, in our bid packages, have checklists. We also have definitions. We have terms. Become familiar with those, because as the law prescribes for procurement in the state of Illinois, procurement is generally accomplished by way of competition. And by understanding the language, by understanding the rules, by understanding the specifications, you're going to become a better competitor. A better competitor means you have potentially a better chance of winning a contract award. Competition is good for us, the city, because the theory is that competition under the law was created because competition will encourage every vendor to come up with their best price, and as a result, the city will pay less for goods and services that it's able to buy through its procurement process. Now, when you come down to City Hall, because you've seen an opportunity in the newspaper, on the internet, wherever it is you've heard about an opportunity, you are going to pick up what's called a bid package. The bid package is going to have specifications. It's basically going to have directions on how to bid, and it's going to have what it is that we're trying to buy in fine detail. When you pick up that bid package, review them carefully, or review the internal documents carefully, because as you'll learn, as I'll discuss, when you ultimately submit your bid, you need to be the lowest responsive and responsible bidder when you're bidding a price on a competitive bid. And you even have to be a responsive and responsible bidder when you're submitting a proposal in response to an RFP, or your qualifications in response to an RFQ. So in other words, when you're submitting, when you're competing, you have to be a responsive and responsible bidder. This is all in accordance with a couple areas of law. I don't necessarily believe you have to go out and learn all the laws that apply to the procurement process today, but if there's even $1 of federal money being spent on a project, it's considered federally funded, at least in part, so federal laws may apply. Beyond federally funded projects, we're always living within the Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act. So if you want to learn a little bit about the framework within which we work, the Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act for populations over 500,000. You can Google Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act or whatever search engine you use, and if you Google Illinois Municipal Purchasing Act or search that term, it'll come up on the first page. You can click on it and you can start reviewing just to get a general idea of what it is the state law sets up as far as a procurement process. Within that state law, the Chicago Municipal Code details how it is that our Chief Procurement Officer sets up and runs her department, the Department of Procurement Services. If you're interested in looking at that Municipal Code section, it is 2-92 of the Chicago Municipal Code, and there's a authorized publisher on the internet, so you don't have to go down to your local law library. You can go to amlegal.com, amlegal.com. It's very user-friendly. You go there, you can click on codes. It'll give you a list of jurisdictions by state. You click on Illinois, follow through to Chicago, and then Chicago Municipal Code. Click through those levels, and you'll find the Municipal Code. Section 2-92 not only establishes the power and authority of the Chief Procurement Officer, it also lays out advertising requirements for our opportunities. It lays out certain participation requirements by minority-owned business enterprises and women-owned business enterprises. It lays out bid preferences and incentives and special programs that even the playing field for newer vendors. So it's worth your while if you're new to the procurement process to, again, not read every word. You don't have to do that. You're busy enough with your own businesses and managing your own company. But it's worthwhile to get an idea of what's out there as far as how we work and what opportunities are there. Now, getting back to bids and bid packages, there are some terms you're going to need to know over time that you'll learn over time. I think generally people have a good idea of what a contract is, right? It's a written document, typically. In our venue, it's going to be a written document. And it sets up the rights and responsibilities between the city and the vendor, or who we have a business relationship with you, right? And it involves an offer by you, the vendor, acceptance by us, the city, and some type of consideration. And for your purposes, that consideration is going to be payment in return for services, right? The bid package I described, that's the package that you pick up when you see an opportunity advertised somewhere from the city of Chicago, again, newspaper, internet, and it sparks your interest and you want to learn more about it and see if you want to bid. You're going to come down here, and you can also have it sent to you electronically, but you're going to pick up or receive a bid package, and it's going to contain all those documents I described earlier, specifications detailing what we want to buy, when your bid has to be submitted, by what date, by what time. It's going to include forms that you have to fill out if you're going to bring on a subcontractor and you want to get credit because that subcontractor is a MBE, Minority Business Enterprise, or a WBE, Women-Owned Business Enterprise. There's forms to fill out and include that in your bid package. Specifications that are in that bid package that detail what it is we're going to buy and how we're going to buy it, they can change even after you pick up that bid package. And if we have to change them, we'll do it by way of what's called an addendum. And we'll send it out to all the vendors that picked up the bid package when the original opportunity was available. And when do we do an addendum? An addendum is typically when we realize, hey, our specifications might have an error. Or we realize after one of the vendors raised a really good question about our specs that, wait, we can improve these specs a little bit to make them more appropriate for our project or for our purchase. And so what we do is we send out an addendum and it specifies, here's what we're changing. Please acknowledge that you now are aware we've changed the specs. And when you submit your bid, you'll initial that, you'll acknowledge that addendum and include it with your bid package. That way we know that you're aware of the change and that you're going to honor it if a contract's awarded to you. When a contract is awarded, sometimes the project can change slightly. And if we, after award of the contract to you, after the business relationship has started, if we decide by agreement we're going to change the understanding of rights and responsibilities, we'll do an amendment or a modification to the contract in writing. If it's an amendment, we'll have it signed by you, the vendor, us, the city, the mayor, the comptroller, and it'll memorialize that everyone understands there's been a change to the business relationship. And a modification is similar. It makes the same changes. It'll be signed by the city, and it modifies the rights and responsibilities of the contract post-award. The bid is your submittal, right? It's your acknowledgments that you understand the project and you're giving your best price if it's a competition for the lowest bidder. An RFP is a request from the city for the vendor community, whoever's interested, to submit a proposal instead of a bid. When we use an RFP process, it's because we're looking for professional services or highly skilled or credentialed services that are not necessarily appropriate for just going to the lowest bidder, right? And I always use the example, there are certain services where as long as companies or individuals meet certain qualifications, you'll allow them to come to your home and provide those services, right? Well, there are a number of services that don't really require professional skills. So you look for just the best price, right? As long as they're minimally qualified, have at least a little experience, then all you care about is getting the best price. But then there are services even in your personal life that, like healthcare, right? You look for a doctor for yourself. You just go on the internet and search on the web, lowest price doctor, will work cheap. No, you try to balance it with your budget and your interest in getting the best healthcare possible. So that's why we use RFPs for services like information technology development, or if it's a Department of Public Health, healthcare providers like doctors for clinics in the city. So we use an RFP when we want to balance and get the best value. The balance is between price and quality. What if we need to have more than one vendor under contract? A circumstance might be, I'll use this as an example, road construction. We know that between potholes and wear and tear on Chicago's roads, that roads are constantly being worked on. Federal funding sometimes is available for helping us pay for that maintenance repair. Sometimes the funding comes in right away. Sometimes we're waiting on federal funding, right? Or road repair companies. Now those services can be competitively bid. But then along with that repair service by those construction companies or other similar companies, we might need engineers that help guide the road repair company in their work. And those engineers are of a skill and credentialed level where we can go through an RFP if we need one, but if we need a pool of them, because, for example, we expect there might be a surge of work in the future, we can do an RFQ, or a request for qualifications. And what we do is we solicit, instead of a competitive bid, instead of a proposal, we solicit qualifications from a group of vendors, and we qualify them. If they qualify, they go into a pool. They wait in that pool, and maybe it's a week, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 2 years. When we're aware of a project where they're needed, We then go to the pool and we say, you are the exclusive group of vendors that have been qualified. Here is a specific piece of work. Now let's compete for this, and we'll assign this work to you. When they complete that work, they go back in the pool until the time period of the pool ends or closes. When we create a pool, the original qualification results in a master agreement between the city and the vendors that gets them in the pool. It's basically like a very broad contract that keeps them in the pool, creates rights and responsibilities about being in that pool. And then when each of those little projects comes along and we award one of those specific projects to one of the vendors in the pool or multiple vendors in the pool, we enter into a task order with each vendor. And that task order is like a mini contract within the master consulting agreement. And it sets up the rights and responsibilities for that specific project. So that's basically how and why we use an RFQ. Now, I talked about participation. Now, historically, there are groups that have been recognized as individuals and businesses that have been excluded from contracting opportunities with governmental units, including the City of Chicago. To remedy that, the Municipal Code section that was enacted was 292-420, and it sets forth the city's minority-owned and women-owned business enterprise procurement programs for all contracts other than construction. Now, by the way, there is MBE, WBE goals that are also included in construction projects. And they may be met through direct participation, forming joint ventures. Keep in mind, if you're going to get credit as a historically disadvantaged firm, you must be certified as such by the city or an agency that we recognize that can certify. And you must be certified as an MBE or WBE. Now, what do I mean by all this participation? What do I mean by all this bringing on vendors that are certified? So, let's say there's a project, and that project is, let's say to supply, or let's say a construction project to build something, and it's a building. The building, let's say, I look at it, I review the specifications, that there's plumbing and electrical work involved. I do concrete as a general contractor, I self-perform that. I frame out buildings as a general contractor, but I typically subcontract out electrical and plumbing work. And I see in the specifications that there needs to be, let's say, 25 or 26% MBE participation and let's say 6% WBE participation. So what does that mean? That means if I bid to build the building and I offer my bid, I'll build that building for $100,000. It means I'm going to bring on, let's say, a MBE, certified minority-owned business that is a plumber, or that offers plumbing services, and I will bring and subcontract that firm, MBE firm, into my project, and that firm will perform actual work in the amount of 26% of the total project, and in return for that work, that MBE will actually get paid $26,000 or 26% of what I'm getting paid, $100,000, presuming I won the project. Similarly, I bring in a WBE, that WBE, and I got to keep track of this. The MBE, I think I said, did electrical, and let's say whatever the alternative is, the plumbing goes to the WBE, who, in my example, will get 6% of actual work, and in return for that 6% actual work, will get $6,000 of actual pay. Now, it's critical that you recognize there has to be actual work and there has to be actual pay. This is not about just lining our files with proof that we're trying, right? Why do we require actual work? Why not just be happy if the vendor's willing to give those percentages of dollars to these vendors? Because the goal of the program is to build capacity. So by working on the project, vendors that are certified get experience working on a project, specifically working on a government project with all our compliance and our paperwork, and gets the ability to gain capacity and make some money while they're at it. So they get a piece of the pie, so to speak, of the project. So it matters because it's been determined that those vendors deserve a piece of these opportunities. It also matters to us because by building capacity in the vendor community, we create what? Additional competition. As I started the conversation, I said increased competition improves the overall bids, the pricing comes down, and we pay less. So over time, the program not only benefits the historically disadvantaged groups, but it also benefits the city, and in turn, benefits all taxpayers. So it works for everybody. Now, I talked about direct participation in my example as a subcontractor. Keep in mind, you can be a certified firm and bid as a prime if you want to. You might not be capable of bidding as a prime. You might not currently have all the capacity, so you might joint venture, and you can bid as a joint venture. A joint venture is an agreement between two or more entities, typically, where you agree you're going to share the responsibilities and share in the fruits of your labor. You're going to share in the pay in whatever portions you agree to, and you bid together. That way, while you might not have capacity individually, together you have capacity to participate as prime contractors. If you are a firm and you're struggling to find vendors in certain specialty areas we're requiring, which does happen, because keep in mind, certifications are based in specialty areas. You don't just get a certification when you're a certified firm to do business generally, right? The certification applies to specialty areas, and those specialty areas are in accordance with what are called NAICS, NAICS codes, or NAICS codes. I throw the S on there. And what it is, that's an industry standard. It's not created by us. It's a standard that was created to break down every type of trade, type of work, type of service there exists in this world. At least they tried to. And they break it down into categories. And those categories are specialties, and you get certified in a specialty area. So for example, you might be certified in electrical work. Then a contractor that's bidding a project can't necessarily bring you in on plumbing work unless you're certified in that area. You can be certified in more than one area if you are eligible. And you can start with one certification, and you can seek to expand your certification later. And the last note I want to throw out there on getting certified is you might be eligible. You don't, however, have to be certified to compete for a project. So I don't want to send a message today that if you're eligible, somehow you have to get certified in order to participate in our process. No. It's just a benefit if you are eligible to be certified that you get your certification. But some firms actually are eligible and never seek their certification. They just don't have the interest for whatever reason they have. They can still bid on projects. They can still act as contractors. It's just that their status as a business owned by a historically disadvantaged individual will not count towards MBE, WBE goals. Okay. The final note on certification is you don't have to have an opportunity in mind to get the certification process started. So if you think you're eligible, start working on your application and seek to get certified right away. Don't wait for an opportunity to spark your interest, because the process of getting certified does take time. We investigate, we review, we make sure someone is eligible, or that groups are eligible, that the business is eligible, that it's a real business, because the program has to have integrity, right? So that those that are to be helped by the program actually are being helped, not individuals that don't qualify. So we police the program, and we exercise a lot of diligence to make sure that the program has integrity. Now, getting back to indirect participation, there are some specialty areas where there's just not representation in the certified community for those areas. General contractors are then left somewhat in a bind, right? Because there's these compliance goals built into the specs, and what do? So what we have is we have an ordinance that allows for indirect participation. And what that basically means is that goals may be met through areas where certified firms are performing business or work for the prime, but not necessarily specific to the project that we're bidding. So you might utilize an MBE firm. You might have your headquarters in Chicago. You're a construction company, and you hire an MBE janitorial service that consistently takes care of your headquarters. So they're not working on the construction project for the city of Chicago, but they are receiving money from your firm in exchange for real work, and they are certified. Well, that participation, if approved, can be used in lieu of direct participation, if direct participation is not available. Okay. But either way, the firm that is certified has to be performing a commercially useful function. Okay? And it has to be managed and controlled and operated by the person or group of people that are eligible. They're historically disadvantaged. And we police all this to make sure that everything is above board. Oh, no problem. Okay. Now, let's say there's no direct participation. There's no indirect participation, or there's partial participation. Vendors can ask for a reduction in the percentages if there's evidence that compliance just can't be made despite good faith efforts. There can even be a waiver of the goals if it's just absolutely not possible. Okay, so keep that in mind. But it has to be in writing, and our Chief Procurement Officer, Jamie Ree, will review the matter thoroughly and make sure wherever possible we are getting participation where we can. Okay. Now up here I've put up basically a little information about what is a commercially useful function, and basically a certified firm must carry out its contract responsibilities by actually performing, managing, supervising the work that they are responsible for. Target market under 292-460 is where the Chicago is the part of the Chicago Municipal Code where we specify, or the city specifies, that we will solicit certified firms first. Okay, so there's categories of work where we will offer the opportunity only to certified firms to start. Now, if there's no interest, we don't receive any interest or bids from certified firms, then we're allowed to go out of the target market and go to the general vendor community. So construction projects may not be bid as target market procurements, just so you're aware. I primarily have talked about MBE and WBE because I'd say that's the largest portion of certified firms that are participating on city contracts. But I mentioned at the beginning, there's federally funded projects. If there's federal funding involved, oftentimes DBE's designation is used. DBE is the federal designation. It basically encompasses MBE and WBEs combined. But we follow rules and requirements that are set up by the federal government for DBE compliance. We also have firms that are business enterprises owned by people with disabilities. And lastly, if you are a DBE that's doing work out at the airport in certain categories, there's ACDBE, which is Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. There are rules that are unique to that type of disadvantaged firm. But the principles are the same, right? Now, we don't have enough time here to go through all the little details about how each of these programs differ, but I just want to warm you up to the idea that the principles are the same. Participation by historically disadvantaged firms, including their individually historically disadvantaged owners, and the goal is to get actual work for them to perform in return for actual pay, for capacity building and increased participation. The eligibility criteria includes that the businesses have to be at least 51% owned and controlled by a minority women or other disadvantaged individuals. The same type of percentage of ownership applies to BEPDs. And we have this requirement because you don't want to have the scenario where some firm gets certified and the eligible person is 5% owner, and non-eligible individuals own 95% of the firm. It's not really then a historically disadvantaged business at that point. So this sort of does two things. It allows the historically disadvantaged individuals to get into the business, but doesn't exclude the ability to cooperate or join forces with non-eligible individuals that can perhaps help the endeavor along, whether it's with experience or whether it's with finances. So it allows firms to get off the ground and not restrict them by having historically disadvantaged individuals shouldering the entire burden of starting the business. But yet they have a very high majority, more than half share of ownership in the business. When you do business with the city, be prepared. By state law and Chicago Municipal Code, there are disclosures that you're going to have to make. And I encourage you to start getting familiar with those disclosures. They're online at our website. cityofchicago.org/procurement is our website. If you go in there, there's a lot of great information. I encourage you just to go to that website, if not just to wander around and learn about the procurement process just through serendipity. You can wander around and learn a lot. But there is a link to the online economic disclosure statement, and it basically asks questions that tell us who you are, who's involved in your company, who owns your company. If it's, sometimes there are large companies, right? And the company we're doing business with is owned by another company, who's owned by another company, who's owned by another company. And we want to know that information because taxpayer dollars are flowing into these companies, and we don't necessarily want to be doing business with individuals, for example, that were debarred from doing government business because maybe they had committed fraud in the past. So we do investigations that include these disclosures so that we know tax dollars are going into the hands of responsible vendors that are good business partners with the city. The EDS, again, is mandatory, and in addition to the prime contractor bidding, it's any entity that has a ownership or beneficial interest that owns 7.5% or more direct or indirect ownership in the prime has to submit its own EDS. So it's the prime contractor bidding and any owners or beneficial interests that, no matter how high up the ladder of ownership, have 7.5% interest or more in the prime. We'll need to do disclosures. Now, most workshops I have include small business owners, so this disclosure is not going to take much time. It's you, your office address, you certify you've never been debarred by another governmental unit, you have never been convicted of certain crimes within the past several years. So you'll be done, if you're a small business owner, you'll be done very quickly with that EDS. But get familiar with it because it is something you have to file when you do business with the City of Chicago. And the DPS website. I want to talk about this a little bit because I think it'll be helpful to you. And by the way, I'm going to be talking about more topics, but because I was on the topic of our website, so I figure I'll cover this. The DPS website, there's a lot of great information. If you go to cityofchicago.org/procurement, you can see an icon in the middle of the page. You can actually look up, there's a search engine that allows you to look for awarded contracts. They're posted online, including amendments and modifications. You can actually see what vendors currently doing business or vendors that have previously done business with the city, when they submitted their invoices, how much they got paid, when they got paid. You can see bid tabulations. So if you're interested in seeing what other vendors have bid on projects that you'd like to do in the future, you can gather some bidding intelligence by looking at the bid tabulations that include a summary of other vendors that have bid and what their bid amounts were. Bid tabulations are also useful because maybe you're not ready to be a prime, or maybe you don't want to be the business entity that's bidding. But maybe you want to subcontract. This is a good way to know who's doing business with the city, and you can contact them. I hope you don't harass them based on my guidance, but you can find out who's doing business in your area, and you can contact them and see if they have interest in bringing you on as a subcontractor on their future bids. can also see online weekly bid opportunities, and you can see new certification initiative information. If you know you're going to bid as a prime and you need to find an MBE or WBE, there's a searchable directory, and it's all at our website where you can gather that information. Now, there are a couple topics I want to talk to you about, but I stay at a high level with them because they are covered by other workshops. But I want to talk about them because I want to give you a general idea of how these topics work, and then also warm you up to the idea of if they spark your interest, then you can look at the workshop schedule and you'll be able to see if there's something that you want to get into deeper by going to another workshop. The other workshops are taught by experts that work and focus on the topic areas, right? So one area is JOC. Can I get a show of hands? Who here is in construction? Okay, one person. So I'm going to keep it short, but give you the main points. And it's helpful to everybody else, by the way, because what I'm about to talk about is called the JOC program. It's different than the typical solicitation and award process I've described so far, but it is consistent with the principles I've talked about, so it's worth knowing a little bit about. You never know when your business might expand where you're either in construction or you're working alongside construction, so it's useful to know. So JOC, job order contracting. Job order contracting is typically for small to medium-sized projects. For larger projects, we typically competitively bid the awards of construction work. But for those small to medium-sized projects, there's a process that was developed years ago called JOC, and basically to create, at the core of that process, an organization or a few organizations created what's called it's a pricing book. And the pricing book itemized tasks, all kind of tasks that are typically involved in construction work, and then set a price to each one of those tasks. And then when we put out a solicitation wanting vendors to compete for JOC work, they can submit a bid where they bid either a markup, a profit, or a discount off that price. And we compare the markups and discounts and figure out what the total bid is when we award a project. It's basically competitive bid, but it's just a modified process a little bit. And what you can do is you can go to the price book and you can basically build a project, right? You have your project, you figure out all the tasks that are involved in your project, you go to the book, you can find all the different tasks that you've pulled out of your project, price them out, and then you put them back together, and then you've got your competition, right? Or the basis of your competition. So that's basically how JOC works. Our construction deputy, our Deputy Procurement Officer over Construction, teaches a JOC workshop, so if you're interested, I encourage you to go. Deputy Whitaker is extremely knowledgeable, been with the city for a long time managing our construction. He's a pretty funny guy too. He makes the presentation entertaining, so he's excellent if you're interested in JOC. What I also want to talk about is one other process, just because if you see it in the newspaper, if you see this on the internet, I just want you to know what it is, right? So an RFI. An RFI is a request for information. Remember I talked about competitive bid, I talked about RFP, RFQ, and now I'm talking about an RFI. What's the difference that an RFI has from all the rest? It doesn't result in a contract. So if you see an RFI, it's an opportunity to help us, but not necessarily an opportunity to get into a business relationship with us right away, if ever. So I want you to be aware of what that is. But it is important, and it is something we use, and it is something that you can participate in that's, I think, a great way to exchange information. So it's a request for information. It can be very short, where we're just summarizing a problem that the city's trying to solve or a goal that we have, and we're basically reaching out to the marketplace and saying, does anyone have any information? Or does anyone know of a product that can fulfill our needs or solve our problem or can somehow innovate or help us innovate something that we're doing as a city? So we will advertise the RFI. We'll try and get feedback. If you see it, you'll read it. Maybe you have information, you want to submit it. We're going to take that information, we're going to digest it, and hopefully it's useful. Is it going to result in business in the future? It could. We might take that information, put it together with other information, maybe put it into a specification when we realize that, hey, this is something we want to buy, but we'll re-advertise it. We won't just go to the vendor that gave us the information and just say, oh, well, thanks for the information, we want to do business with you. We can't do that. We have to put it back out and advertise it and give everybody an opportunity. And there will be questions about whether or not, if you submitted the information, you can participate in the future competition. Hopefully you can, and then you benefit by providing the information. But it is important to know an RFI does not immediately result in a business opportunity. It is also, I think, important to keep track of ethical rules when you're doing business with the City of Chicago. So if you go to cityofchicago.org, there's a government menu bar at the top. If you click on that and bring it down, there's a Board of Ethics link. Click on that, it'll take you to Board of Ethics. Keep in mind there are procurement lobbying rules, and that will impact what type of communications you can have with the city and how you have them. Now, we provide information and we meet with the public as we are now. There's an exchange of information. So there's that line between learning about opportunities and the market and exchanging information, and then there's procurement lobbying where individuals try to influence actions that we're going to take. And I just encourage you to become familiar with the lobbying rules. Chances are you're not going to cross those lines, especially if what you're doing is reading solicitations, submitting bids. I mean, that's not lobbying, right? But there is a change once you take certain additional steps to persuade actions that the city has. Also keep in mind that there are requirements that if you observe, witness, hear about certain types of fraudulent activity going on in the city related to procurement, that you notify the city. Specifically, this Office of the Inspector General works on flushing out waste, fraud, and abuse in city work and city contracting. So it is important to keep in mind that those responsibilities do exist as well. Now, the last little point I want to make on the topic of solicitations, RFPs, RFQs, RFI. I said RFQ, that's request for qualifications. Sometimes you'll see that either from the city or other governmental units, you'll see RFQ. Sometimes that acronym stands for request for quote. So keep in mind that difference, because you might think, oh, RFQ. I listened to Terry Glavin's presentation, and that's a request for qualification, so I'm just going to submit my qualifications with no price because I want to get in a pool. Well, no, sometimes an RFQ is a request for quote, which is basically a request for a bid. And in our system, that typically will be for small orders. Small orders are by statute orders that are under $100,000. Basically, our contract with you would be for under $100,000. And the law allows us to follow a somewhat less formal process for small orders. We still advertise those opportunities, but technically we don't have to. We can solicit bids by phone, email, other more informal process. And so small orders are a little bit different. They can sometimes be referred by governmental units as RFQs. While I'm on the topic of RFQs, of other governmental units, keep in mind that we are the contracting authority for the City of Chicago. I specify that because I grew up in the City of Chicago, many of you probably did, and you see all the things operating around you that are government related. The trains are running on the tracks. You go to the local park, there's basketball courts and recreational sports equipment, and you go to Navy Pier, and you walk around, there's security guards patrolling the pier or McCormick Place. They're not buying their goods and services at those locations through us. Those areas I just mentioned, they are sister agencies, we call them. So, for example, the trains are run by the Chicago Transit Authority, as most of you know. Navy Pier and the Convention Center over in the South Loop. McCormick Place, that's run by Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority, McPier. That's another governmental unit. Park districts run the basketball courts and the field houses and buy the sports equipment. They're separate governmental units. They have their own procurement laws that they abide by. They have their own procurement departments. They make their own purchases. They advertise their own opportunities. So if you go to the newspaper, and by the way, we advertise in the Chicago Sun-Times. If you go to the classified ad section, if you're looking for opportunities, there's a section of the classified ad section that has all the little ads from the different governmental units, separate, because we're all separate governmental units. We're all sister agencies of each other. And if you go to that section, you'll see that governmental units they solicit and receive bids independent of us. We buy for the City of Chicago. The City of Chicago is made up of a whole lot of city departments. If you're interested in seeing those city departments, go to cityofchicago.org. At the top of the menu, again, there's government. When you pull down the tab, you'll see links to all the pages for all the departments. I encourage you to go look at each one of those web pages, because by looking at their mission, by looking at what announcements they're making, you can get an idea of what it is each department buys. You can also see links to the sister agencies, so you don't have to look all around the internet. You can actually see a summary of all the sister agencies. When you get a contract, if you successfully win a contract, whether it's by competitive bid, RFP or RFQ, keep in mind, you are not doing business with the Department of Procurement Services. You are doing business with the department that we put a contract in place for. So, in summary, as far as the process, it's the departments that have a mission, right? And we have a mission. Contract from us, you have a business relationship between the department and you. Okay, so keep that in mind. So what happens is, when there's a need that's determined, it's determined by the department. So if there's a need for police cars, because ours are getting old or run down, the police department knows, they're the experts in what police cars need to be. How many doors, how big the seats need to be for police officers, or how small, where guns need to be stored, what kind of security in the trunk you need to store ammunition and firearms, what kind of lights and sirens there need to be. We don't have the knowledge of every type of thing the city buys, so we rely on the departments out in the field to develop the specifications. They send the specifications to us. We make sure they comply with the law, that they're detailed enough so that everyone knows what they're bidding on, but not so detailed that we're targeting a solicitation towards one vendor and reducing competition. So we make sure specs are good. We advertise them. We advertise them in the Sun-Times or on the internet. You see that opportunity, you respond. We evaluate the bid. When we award, we hand the contract and with it your business relationship with the department to the department. Okay. I'm getting a little bit into my topic on doing business with the City of Chicago, but I want to emphasize that it's good to know the process. It's good to know that it's a competitive process, and that ultimately, if you become familiar with the process, the terms that we talk in, and if you do a little bit of studying on your own and a little bit of preparation, gather a little bit of intelligence, with that you become more competitive, and with the knowledge of the fundamentals we talked about today, being more competitive, you're going to have more likelihood of success in the competition for city work. Okay. So I am going to leave it with that, because I want to leave some time for questions and answers. Now also, before I close out the slides, cityofchicago.org / Facebook. So I have the link to our Facebook page up there. We are very active on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Follow us. We put a lot of information out there. You can stay current and be aware of what's going on with our department and procurement generally. Also, outside the bid and bond room, there is a workshop schedule. Check out the workshop schedule for my workshop in addition to this one, my workshops in addition to this one, and other experts' workshops from our department. And also, keep in mind there's handouts out in the hallway. Please collect the handouts. You'll be able to get more information as well. I'm going to end the presentation, and I'm going to open it up for questions and answers. And as I do that, I believe we're going to have a microphone. And when we do, if there are questions, I'm going to repeat your question just so that it gets caught and can be replayed through YouTube. And I will, after restating the question, I will provide an answer. If you have a very specific question to your situation that really is not relevant to others in the room, or you just want to ask your case-specific question, I'll stick around afterwards, and I'll gladly answer questions one-on-one where I can. With that, are there any questions? Yes, ma'am. It is, well, the question is,
because now it's something new. I'm not familiar with that, but I get this information for our certification. But I think you're going to hear about economic disclosure statements. Is it something new?
it is not new. The question is, are economic disclosure statements the same as certifications? And so my answer is, they are related in ways, but they are generally different. And I'll explain that answer. When you complete your economic disclosure statement, you're disclosing information about you and your company and who's working with you, who's affiliated with you, right? You are certifying that the answers in your disclosure are true. So there is a certification in your EDS, okay? But an EDS is related to disclosures that are required when the government's going to take action, like award you a contract and start doing work with you. Now, certification, and I presume you're talking about certification related to MBE and or WBE participation or certification, or DBE or all the others. That process of being certified is the city certifying that you are in fact a firm that's eligible for the program. There are additional certifications that fall under that umbrella that you make that are part of your application program. Like you certify as far as your status as being eligible, that you have work experience, where your office is located, how many, all the things that you're stating in your application, you're certifying when you sign off on it that that's true. And also things like information about your personal net worth, all the things that go into your application package to become certified, you in fact certify or you affirm that everything you're saying is in fact true, so that we can rely on it and investigate it if we need to in order to prove that you are eligible, so we can certify you with certainty. So they're different processes, but they overlap because there are certifications in each process. Does that answer? They are different. Yes. In other words, someone who's going to get a government contract will have to do an EDS, regardless of whether they're certified, seeking certification or not. Some firms that are not eligible will seek the award of a contract, and they will have to do an EDS, and they will never have to do anything related to MBE, WBE certification. So they are, in fact, separate in that way. On the other hand, there are some firms that become certified as an MBE, WBE, DBE. They will get certified. They will still have to do an EDS when they participate as a prime on a city contract. So in that case, they're separate, but they become related to a certain degree.
You have 2 workshops too. One is specific to how to become certified, and then our newest workshop is how to complete an online economic disclosure statement. So we have 2 different workshops specifically to each one.
Okay, but I think maybe I missed it, and I needed
So it is on our YouTube. Oh, how to become certified?
Have you spoken with somebody from our certification unit? I gave my business cards out earlier. Please consider calling me at my office. I will connect you with the certification officer, Deputy Coleman, and he will guide you wherever he can. But I'll at least connect you so you can have the conversation. Okay, so please reach out. Feel free to email as well. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Going back to your analysis or example of hiring a cleaning firm, you know, for indirect. So I hire a cleaning firm to clean our offices. Every month I give them $1,000 because they do $1,000 worth of work.
And they are certified by the city?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so then in April, a bid opportunity comes up that I want to bid on. And whatever the percentages happen to be for the bid. What can I use from that MB or WB? You know, I've been using the cleaning service since January. So I've paid them $3,000 before the bid goes, and I'm going to continue. So let's say I'm awarded the contract in August or whatever it happens to be. Can I use the money that was spent prior to that actual award date? Do you know what I mean?
What I'm going to do is, because it sounds to me that your question is project specific, and what I will do is I'm going to stick around afterwards, gather some information for you. I just want to make sure when I weigh in that I'm not weighing in on a active current project that might be up for questions. So if you don't mind, what I'll do is I'll gather information from you after the session, and then I will try to give you as much feedback as I can. Just need to find out where the status of your project is, and then I'll be glad to provide guidance. And then also what I do, I have handouts. Actually, they're available online if you want to reach out to me. There's a write-up, a summary of, and it's more user-friendly than the ordinance, that details exactly what you can use, how you can apply it, and it's actually online at our webpage. If it's difficult to find when we talk, I'll also direct you to that. I can even email it to you. And I think it does a good job of being user-friendly and explaining what you can use from your higher off project and how you can apply it to your bid. So I will, or not your bid, but to your participation on your upcoming project. So I'll help you with that.
Okay.
Great. Okay. And if anyone else has questions on that same topic, please, I'll bring you in on the conversation and we can get you that information. Yes.
Another question is, how do you know if it's
You can look at the specifications, and it'll talk about funding in the project. Also, in the contract itself, we identify whether it's federal funding, local funding, city funded, we should say. So, yeah, the bid package, if you look through it thoroughly, it'll say.
Is it always stated funded or not stated?
We don't always have the funding identified during the solicitation process, but generally you'll see it in the solicitation documents, in the bid package.
Maybe my question was more direct, because you said on federal funded it is more DBE than MW.
Right.
So if it's federal, I was just wondering if it's federal funded, are the forms then DBE? You know what?
Yes. Now keep in mind, DBE at the federal level is established through the Federal Department of Transportation. So it is, typically you're going to see it on transportation related projects or like that includes, by the way, airport projects. And then in those projects, there's commonly federal funding, and then it triggers the DBE requirements. So you'll be following a lot of the DBE language, DBE regulations, as opposed to some of the specific MBE, WBE regulations. But between not always specifically having the funding strip identified and also some projects not falling under the purview of the Department of Transportation and its DBE program, sometimes it might not be included in the package. But that's the place to start, is when you pick up the bid package. I say it every time. Read through every page of the bid package when you receive it, and one of the items you most likely will find is the funding source, or funding sources. And by the way, it could be city and federally funded. It could be city, state, and, so there can be a combination of funds we put together to pay for projects. But read that package first. If you're still a little bit confused about it, you can contact Department of Procurement Services. But also keep in mind, you'll see forms in the bid package that are related to the type of program that is applicable. So for example, you're going to see MBE, WBE forms in the bid package when we put the bid package together for vendors. So you're going to know it's MBE, WBE related. Or you're going to see DBE paperwork because it's a DBE project. So keep that in mind as well. But you can always reach out to us. And there are a couple other things too. Say you get a bid package, look to see if there's a pre-bid conference. Oftentimes we offer an opportunity for vendors to come in together and ask questions. So you might say, hey, I didn't see what kind of project funding this is, or I didn't see the details, like how am I supposed to be using a DBE process, or am I supposed to be doing paperwork for MBE? You can come in during the pre-bid and you can ask questions, and we will provide answers through a clarification.